Welcome to the video that will cover the concept of zones as a part of the Takt production system series. So once you have identified your phases, we now need to identify our zones. And so we are zooming in here into the interiors portion of the example, and you can see that each one of these sequences that are shown from left to right have zones. So zone 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. So this will be labeled near the sequence, and this is the location base for the overall schedule. Time on the top, location on the left, and this is what it looks like in the actual schedule. So to understand the concept of how to actually identify your zones, we're going to have to begin with our example. In this example, this is a normal mild reinforced concrete structure with concrete decks and columns, a normal HVAC system, medical office building, very simple structure, but we're using the level 2 as an example. And so this is the plan set for level 2. You'll notice that the work density in here, or the amount of work that needs to take place in here, is not leveled, meaning this is not like a multi-family structure. This is not super repetitive. The work over here is more dense than it is over here, but we can still zone it out and tact it out, knowing that any type of building, any type of structure can fit beautifully inside the Takt production system. It does not have to be rhythmic. All we have to do is right size the zones. So let's go ahead and showcase how we do that. So if you're going to identify your zones inside the building, what you should do is use your builder knowledge and start to identify what's called constraints. Now, I know you've heard in the lean industry the term constraints in reference to what is normally termed a roadblock, but the real definition of a constraint is something that is constraining you, something that's semi-permanent or permanent. And so listing these out like, hey, this is the start of the curtain wall, the first stair, these are elevators, this is where the hoist will be. These are things that will constrain the flow of construction. And so you can see in here the builders identified the general flow with this arrow through this floor so that zones could be identified. So the next step is we need to start analyzing work density. And so I created these red lines here over the grid lines to indicate that we are going to break this floor up into the grid squares so that we can analyze how dense the work is inside of them so that we can properly outline the boundaries of these zones. And so what we do, and my preference, the simplest way in my mind, is to put these 9 blocks, these grid squares, on Excel, and then flip the drawings page by page and understand and analyze the work density. And so if I'm flipping through the architectural, mechanical drawings, all the different types of drawings inside the floor, I'm getting an idea of where the work is and where the level of effort required is pretty dense. I can go through here and scale on a 1 to 10 the amount of work density in each one of these cells in the 9 block inside that pattern. And so in this example, I did that. And you'll see that 8, this represents a typical exam room. This 7 is a conference room. The 4, this is a hallway. 9s, this is the elevator bank and the bathrooms. And so when you see the lower numbers, these are areas with less work density. The higher numbers have higher work density. Human beings are horrible at estimating time, but we're very, very good at estimating work density. And so what we're able to do here is take an initial guess. Now, I do want to be clear here. This is a guess. Because we have the work density, we can go ahead and identify how many zones we want. Typically, we're going to start on the larger side, meaning keep zones a little bit on the larger side when we're guessing. But you'll see that this 7,300, 7,200, 14,000 square foot spread on these zones, this is not equal area, but it is fairly equal or leveled work density. So that means if a crew is going to come into this zone, they would experience a similar amount of work as this zone and this zone. This one's bigger because the work is less dense. And so we're going to take an initial guess about how many zones we want, and then our calculator is going to turn it into data. So stay with me. I hope this isn't too complex, but we are, once we have our work density, going to guess on our initial zoning. Once we have our guess, we now need to find out generally how many Takt wagons are going to be inside the zones. And so what I've done here is put together a rough activity list with historical production information, divided it by the number of zones that I have, which gives me the durations. Now, from a high level, I don't want to get too detailed in here. If this is 2 days, I know that in a 5-day takt time, which is going to be my macro, I'm going to put 1, 2. But this final patch ceiling can start on the second day of that first activity and go 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the 4 days here. And so I can literally package those two into one takt wagon. So that's my first takt wagon. So I'm doing a rough and dirty takt wagon analysis, a rough packaging exercise, and I find out that I roughly have about 25 wagons in this example. Once I have that, I can fill out my calculator. This is a really cool calculator invented by Kevin Rice based on the formulas that Janos Louis and Marco Binniger developed in their doctoral thesis. And so this calculator, if you enter in 25 wagons and 3 takt zones on a 5-day takt time, it will simulate 25 wagons in each scenario, but it will give you different zoning strategies, what the different takt times would be, and the durations. And so you can pause the video and look at what all of these columns do, but for the purpose of this video, I simply want to say that we are wanting to analyze, is 3 zones, our initial guess, the right number? And if you hop over here to this takt level column, you'll see that it is not. It says bad. That means it is not a competitive zoning strategy. And so we have a problem here. We need to make an adjustment. So the concept here is that, and I love this visual to explain this, if you have the same amount of work, which is represented in each one of these options, but you look at different zoning strategies, meaning you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, you'll see that the end date will adjust based on your zoning strategy. This is based on the concept of Little's Law, adapted to construction. And so this is what the phase would look like with one zone. This is what it would look like with 2. And you can see that the optimized strategy here is 5. So if we look at this takt calculator, again, invented by Kevin Rice, with an initial guess of 25 wagons, 3 zones, and a 5-day takt time, we're in a bad range. And so the team is likely going to, and they did in this example, choose 5 because that's in the macro range. What we've learned with this calculator is you want to be in the middle or anywhere above 45% realized flow potential and down. And so 5 and even 6 would be really, really nice strategies for this. And so the idea is we want to get into the macro level for our macro level takt plans and our norm level for our norm level takt plans. So going back here, if we're here in the middle, we're in the macro. If we're anywhere in this range, we're in the norm. And as you'll see later in the videos, for the macro, this team chose 5. For the norm, this team chose 11 zones. And so what we're attempting to do by creating the right zoning strategy is to identify the macro level, which gives us our contractual milestone. This is what we're promising the owner, right? This is a somewhat conservative zoning strategy, and it has a realized flow potential between 35% and 50%. And we want it in that range so that later we can optimize it between a 50 and 100% realized flow potential, which is our norm level, and gain buffers back in the schedule, which every schedule needs in order to be successful. And so Like I said, the macro level zoning strategy that the team is going to choose is 5 in this scenario. So once they find out, and let me actually go back, that we really want to have a 5-zone strategy, then the team will take that information and repackage it. And because there are more zones and the sequence narrows, it will now package into 1 through 15, meaning 15 total wagons. This is a hard concept to understand, but suffice it to say that when we take it from a 3-zone strategy to a 5-zone, the sequence of activities will narrow within the wagon. So instead of 25, we'll now have 15. If the project team was going to go straight into the norm, they would likely choose 11. And so you see we've plugged in here 15 and 5 in our calculator, and 11 zones seems to be a really nice strategy for the norm. And so when you package the norm, you will package that into the proper takt time, and this is what it will look like. So when you're done, if you decided to package it for the macro, because you plugged it in the calculator and was able to verify with mathematics the right zoning strategy, you know that at least for level 2, the right zoning strategy is 5 zones and 15 wagons. And so that's how we develop our macro level takt plans and know that we are competitive. And so this would be our adjusted zone map. If we were going to go directly into the norm on level 2, this is what that 11 zone strategy would look like. And this is what our zone map would look like with the 11 zones. Those are the same schedule, they're just going at different speeds. So if you look at the schedule here with the 5-zone strategy in the macro, right, and you see that it's finishing at a certain date, this is what we promised to the owner, right? And then when we are optimizing it, once we do our pull plans as a part of this sequence, we've involved the trade partners and we're wanting to go faster and target a faster duration. We use our 11-zone strategy, but we have gained buffers, which are needed for us to absorb delays and variation. And so once you know that you have an updated zoning strategy, I do want to make the point that you can't just come in here and make pretty boxes. If you did that and you analyze the density, they wouldn't be equal. It'd be 104, 160, 158. That's not right. You would have to adjust the boundaries to where your zone density was fairly equal. And when you do that, you will then finish up by identifying what is your workable backlog, what is your normal horizontal flow, what are your vertical flows on the floor, and make sure that those are properly labeled. And I do want to close out by saying that when you are looking at your horizontal flow or your vertical flow, your horizontal flow is when your trades are moving horizontally across the floor. Vertical is when they're moving up, right? And you will see these shown differently in the schedule. So this down here is our horizontal flow, okay? This is our vertical flow. It's shown as a separate phase. And then if I ever had an interruption and I need to go to workable backlog, right? This workable backlog is shown as well if I go back. So this is where if the train stops, I can go work here, or if the train has trouble, I can take labor from here and bring it back into the main part of the sequence. And so this is how you, after you identify your phases, know how many zones you should have so that you have the boundaries identified correct per the work density, and you can then start to focus in on your takt time and build out the rest of your takt plan. I hope that this has been helpful. If you ever want more information, please reach out to us. On we go.